Admiral Vraxis stood at the edge of the command deck, his 6 golden eyes locked onto the swirling chaos outside the flagship's massive viewport. The void between the stars had turned into a graveyard. Dozens of shattered ships, once proud vessels of the Galactic Empire, drifted silently, their wreckage a horrifying testament to the battle unfolding around them. Vraxis gritted his teeth. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to be an easy conquest, a footnote in the Empire's long history of dominations. Yet here they were, fighting like demons out of legend. "Status report," he barked, his voice echoing harshly across the bridge. "Admiral, we've lost the 7th, 8th, and 12th Assault Squadrons," the tactical officer stammered, his scales paling from emerald green to sickly white. "Enemy forces are regrouping near the orbital debris field." "That's impossible," Vraxis slammed his fist into the command rail. "They shouldn't have the strength left to regroup." The officer hesitated, then swallowed hard. "Sir, there's something else." Vraxis whipped around. "Out with it!" The bridge fell into a tense silence. Every officer on board could feel it, that creeping sensation of doom, thick and suffocating like smoke. "We intercepted a human transmission," the officer said at last, voice shaking. Their admiral was heard saying, "Our main fleet hasn't even entered the battlefield yet." For a moment, Vraxis thought he misheard. He blinked slowly, his mind struggling to wrap itself around the words. The humans hadn't committed their full strength? They were fighting back this viciously with only a fraction of their forces? A cold, alien fear gripped his heart. "No," he whispered. "That can't be right." But deep down, he knew it was. The signs were all there. The brutal hit-and-run tactics, the ferocity of their pilots, the unrelenting way they fought for every inch of space. These weren't the desperate acts of a cornered prey. These were the calculated maneuvers of a predator, one that had been playing the Empire for fools. "Order the fleet to pull back," Vraxis growled, his voice low and deadly. "Now." The helmsman hesitated. "Sir, if we retreat now, it will look like cowardice. The Council—" "To the void with the Council," Vraxis roared. "You haven't seen what I've seen today. The humans, they're not fighting to survive. They're fighting to win." Before the helmsman could respond, alarms screamed across the bridge. A new formation of human ships had just dropped out of hyperspace, sleek, black vessels bristling with weapons that made even the Empire's most advanced cruisers look outdated and slow. The tactical officer gasped. "Sir, new contacts. 70, no, 100 ships." Another burst of static-filled transmission cut across the bridge speakers. "This is Admiral Cole of the United Terran Forces," a calm, steel-edged voice said. "To the invading forces of the so-called Galactic Empire, you are ordered to surrender immediately. You have one chance." Vraxis felt his knees buckle. He caught himself on the railing, breathing hard. Around him, the bridge crew stood frozen, terror written across every face. They had underestimated humanity. They had thought Earth was a backwater world, weak and primitive. They hadn't understood that humans were something far more dangerous. They were survivors. They were warriors. And they were just getting started. The bridge lights dimmed to blood red as the ship's emergency protocols kicked in. Vraxis barely registered the flashing warnings. His mind was spinning too fast, trapped between disbelief and raw fear. He turned back to the viewport, staring out at the human fleet now surrounding them like a noose, tightening around the Empire's throat. Their ships moved with terrifying precision, a silent, coordinated dance of death. "Raise shields to maximum and prepare to break through their lines," Vraxis barked, but his voice cracked halfway through. The crew scrambled, but everyone knew it was futile. These humans weren't just better armed. They were smarter, faster, and utterly merciless. In the span of hours, they had done what no other empire had ever managed. They had broken the spirit of the undefeated galactic forces. Vraxis clenched his claws against the railing. He couldn't accept this. They were the Empire. They were supposed to be the masters of the galaxy, not humiliated by a species barely 3 centuries into spaceflight. A junior officer, voice trembling, said, "Sir, incoming transmission again." "Put it through," Vraxis said, his mouth dry. Admiral Cole's face appeared on the main screen, a man in his late 40s, with cold gray eyes and a scar running down his cheek. His expression was calm, almost bored, like he was addressing an insect. "This is your final warning," Cole said. "Surrender. There will be no negotiations after this." The transmission ended abruptly, giving no time for reply. Vraxis drew a long, ragged breath. In the silence that followed, he could hear the whispered prayers of his bridge crew, each muttering in their own language. Desperation hung in the air like a heavy fog. "Enemy movements detected," the tactical officer cried out. "They're preparing to fire." "All ships, defensive formation Omega," Vraxis shouted. "If we can punch through the left flank, we might—" Before he could finish, a series of bright blue flashes erupted across the human fleet. Their weapons fired in perfect synchronization, a relentless, calculated barrage that tore into the Empire's ships with surgical precision. Vraxis watched in horror as 3 cruisers simply vanished from the sensors, torn apart in seconds. The Empire's defensive lines collapsed like wet paper. Screams filled the bridge as more ships reported catastrophic damage or went silent altogether. "Sir, our left flank is gone," someone cried. Vraxis squeezed his eyes shut for half a heartbeat, trying to think. There had to be a way out. There always was. "Signal all remaining forces," he growled. "Prepare for emergency hyperspace jump. Get us out of here." "But sir—" "Do it!" Vraxis roared, slamming his fist against the control panel hard enough to crack it. The helmsman scrambled to comply, entering the emergency jump coordinates. Just as he confirmed the jump sequence, another alarm blared, harsher, sharper than before. "Human ships are jamming our hyperspace drives!" the engineer shrieked. "We can't jump!" The words hit Vraxis like a physical blow. His legs gave out, and he stumbled back into his command chair, staring blankly at the screen. Trapped. They were trapped. He looked again at the human fleet, now slowly advancing on them like hunters closing in for the kill. Vraxis realized with a sickening certainty that they weren't just going to lose this battle. They were about to be erased. Not a surrender, not an occupation. Total annihilation. The humans hadn't just come to defend their world. They had come to end the Empire. He had no choice left. Swallowing the bitter acid of defeat, Vraxis opened a transmission to Admiral Cole. "This is Admiral Vraxis of the Galactic Empire," he said, voice hoarse and broken. We surrender." The screen flickered to life again, showing Cole once more. The human admiral gave a small, cold smile that held no mercy at all. "You had your chance," he said. "Now you live, or die, on our terms." The screen went black. Vraxis slumped in his chair, feeling the weight of centuries crash down on his shoulders. Around him, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence, the mighty empire reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale for the history books. They had thought themselves invincible. They had thought humanity was weak. They had been wrong. So terribly, fatally wrong. The lights on the command deck flickered as the human ships pressed closer, their weapons hot and ready. A few desperate ships in the Imperial fleet tried to break away, engines screaming against the jamming fields, but one by one they were picked off like insects under a magnifying glass. Explosions painted the blackness of space with ugly orange blossoms. Vraxis sat motionless, watching the slaughter unfold. In all his years of conquest, He had never seen anything like this. An enemy that not only outmatched them, but showed no hesitation in crushing them utterly. No quarter given, no hesitation, no mercy. The humans fought as if they had a personal grudge against the very idea of the Empire existing. He gritted his teeth, the taste of blood sharp in his mouth. This wasn't a war anymore. It was an execution. A soft beep sounded on the command chair's console. Private channel. Incoming. Vraxis leaned forward and accepted the transmission, expecting another ultimatum. Instead, Admiral Cole's voice came through, calm and cold. "Listen carefully, Vraxis," Cole said. "You have exactly 10 minutes to order your fleet to stand down and evacuate all surviving personnel from the ships. Any vessel that fails to comply will be destroyed. There are no negotiations, no treaties, no mercy. Understand?" Vraxis hesitated, pride screaming inside him to resist. But reality crushed it swiftly. They had already lost. Further resistance would only spill more Imperial blood for nothing. He pressed the transmission button and spoke in a voice that no longer sounded like his own. "Understood." When the line cut, Vraxis slumped back again, the fire inside him extinguished. He turned to his shattered bridge crew. "Order all surviving units to power down weapons, lower shields, and prepare evacuation pods," he said. "Inform them we have surrendered." The crew moved without question. Orders were relayed, ships powered down, and thousands of small escape pods began launching from the Imperial ships, drifting slowly toward a neutral zone established by the humans. Vraxis watched as his mighty fleet, the pride of the Empire, scattered like dying embers into the void. The humiliation was unbearable. Every second felt like a knife twisting in his gut. Yet the humans did not fire. They let the escape pods drift safely. They had won, they knew it, and they wanted the Empire to witness their mercy as much as their wrath. It was a statement, one that Vraxis understood all too clearly. You are broken, you are conquered, and you are allowed to live only because we permit it. Vraxis rose slowly from his command chair, his legs unsteady. His ship, the Imperial dreadnought Velkar, would be boarded soon. He could already see the human assault craft docking along the hull, their sharp black bodies like the teeth of a predator, ready to rip apart what little was left. He took a long, last look at the bridge, memorizing every detail. The cracked control panels, the dead crewmen slumped over their stations, the thin smoke rising from shattered consoles. This was the end of an era. The doors at the rear of the bridge hissed open, and human soldiers poured in, weapons raised, faces hidden behind expressionless helmets. "Hands where we can see them!" one barked. Vraxis raised his hands slowly, feeling the heavy gaze of every soldier on him. He was just another prisoner now, no longer Admiral Vraxis of the Galactic Empire, just a defeated relic of a dead regime. As he was roughly shackled and led away, he caught one final glimpse of the viewport. Outside, the human fleet floated like a steel storm over the broken remains of his armada. The Empire had come to Earth expecting slaves. Instead, they had found monsters, and Vraxis knew, with a deep and terrible certainty, that the galaxy itself would never be the same again. The walk down the ruined halls of the Velkar felt endless. Each step echoed with the shame Vraxis carried like a chain around his neck. The human soldiers flanked him on both sides, their weapons always trained, their movements sharp and professional. They didn't jeer, didn't speak, didn't even glance at him with the contempt he might have expected. It was almost worse. He wasn't even worth their hatred, just another defeated enemy to be processed and forgotten. They led him to one of the drop shuttles docked on the hull. As he was forced inside, Vraxis caught a glimpse of the other prisoners, Imperial officers, ship captains, soldiers, all stripped of their weapons helmets abandoned, faces pale and hollow. These were the finest the Empire had produced, now sitting quietly like cattle awaiting slaughter. The shuttle doors sealed shut with a hiss, and a low hum filled the chamber as it detached from the Velcar. Through the small, reinforced window, Vraxis could see the massive human flagship growing closer. It was an ugly ship, brutal and utilitarian, without the sleek grandeur of imperial designs. But every inch of it radiated strength and menace, a floating fortress made for one purpose: war. The shuttle docked, and one by one they were herded out. No words were spoken. Vraxis stumbled a bit as he stepped onto the cold metal floor of the human ship. The air smelled different, harsh, industrial, full of oil and ozone. It was a smell of machinery and sweat, not ceremony and empire. They were marched through a labyrinth of corridors until they arrived at a massive holding bay. Hundreds of prisoners already filled the space, surrounded by heavily armed guards. A thick, invisible weight hung over everything, the undeniable knowledge that their fates were no longer their own. Vraxis was pushed into the line and left standing there. For a while, he just stared at the floor, lost in the swirling storm of his thoughts. Then, a low murmur rippled through the crowd. He looked up. Standing on a raised platform at the far end of the bay was Admiral Cole, flanked by several human officers. He wasn't dressed in ceremonial garb or some ridiculous victor's robe. No medals gleamed on his chest. He wore a simple, worn black uniform. Practical, efficient, deadly. Cole stepped forward and surveyed the gathered prisoners, his gray eyes as cold as deep space. "You thought we were weak," he began, voice carrying easily across the bay. "You thought humanity would kneel." Vraxis felt the sting of the words, felt them strike the hearts of everyone present. There was no anger in Cole's tone, no boastfulness, just a simple, brutal truth. "You didn't understand us," Cole continued. "You thought because we were fractured, because we fought amongst ourselves, that we were easy prey. You mistook our chaos for weakness, our divisions for frailty." The human admiral leaned in slightly, voice dropping into a tone that made the hair along Vrax's neck rise. "You failed to see what every tyrant before you has learned the hard way, that nothing unites humanity faster than an enemy who tries to break us." Silence hung thick after his words. Cole straightened again, hands clasped behind his back. "You are no longer soldiers. You are no longer rulers. You are prisoners of war. Your fate will be decided by the United Terran Tribunal. And believe me, Earth does not forget." He turned sharply and marched away, the heavy doors at the rear of the bay hissing closed behind him. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Vraxis stared after him, a hollow pit opening in his chest. He understood now why the Empire had lost. The humans hadn't just been fighting for survival. They had been fighting for revenge, for dignity, for every insult and every threat the Empire had ever thrown at them. And they had fought like only humans could, with every ounce of fury, stubbornness, and savagery in their blood. Vraxis slumped back against the cold wall of the holding bay, the final pieces of his pride crumbling to dust. They hadn't just underestimated Earth. They had awakened it. And the galaxy would bleed for it. The hours dragged by in the holding bay, a heavy silence pressing down on everyone. Some of the captured officers huddled together in small groups, whispering in broken voices, clinging to scraps of hope. Others just sat alone, staring into nothing, their minds adrift somewhere far from this cold, metallic prison. Vraxis stayed where he was, slumped against the wall, watching, listening, trying to piece together what little information he could. He learned fast that the humans had moved with terrifying efficiency after the battle. Every Imperial ship that surrendered was boarded within minutes, every officer catalogued, every database ripped apart. There would be no opportunity for a second resistance, no chance to rally and fight again. The humans hadn't just defeated them on the battlefield, they were ripping the Empire out by its roots. A harsh klaxon blared overhead, jolting everyone to their feet. The prisoners were ordered into rows, hands behind their heads, as heavily armed soldiers stormed the bay again. This time, they weren't just here to guard, they were here to select. Vraxis tensed as soldiers moved down the rows, stopping at intervals, tagging certain prisoners and pulling them away. No explanations were given. No pattern was obvious. Some were high-ranking officers, others were lowly deckhands. The selection seemed almost random, but the fear it spread was surgical, calculated. When they reached him, a human soldier paused. Their visor hid their expression, but there was a hesitation there, almost like they recognized him. Then the soldier raised a scanner, its green beam sweeping across Vraxis' face. "Admiral Vraxis," a mechanical voice confirmed from the device. The soldier tapped something on their wrist pad. Two more humans appeared instantly, gripping Vraxis by the arms and dragging him out of line. He didn't struggle. There was no point. They led him through more twisting corridors until they reached a small interrogation room. Spartan, clinical, a table and 2 chairs bolted to the floor. A single camera blinked in one corner. Vraxis was shoved into a chair, his bindings secured to the tabletop. The soldiers left without a word, the door locking behind them with a final, decisive hiss. He sat there for what felt like hours, the cold metal seeping into his bones. His mind wandered in dark circles, memories of glorious battles, of victory parades on the homeworld, of the Emperor's proud voice declaring the Empire's destiny among the stars. All of it, ashes now. The door finally opened. Admiral Cole walked in alone, a datapad in one hand. He didn't sit. He just stood there, looking down at Vraxis like one might study a dangerous animal trapped behind glass. "Vraxis," Cole said, voice flat. "Architect of the Imperial Northern Campaign, executor of the Alari massacres, slayer of the Ventari colonies." Each title was spoken like a blade being twisted in Vraxis' gut. "You built your reputation on crushing the weak," Cole continued, his eyes narrowing, "on conquering civilizations that couldn't fight back. You carved out your legacy in blood and ash, and you thought Earth would be another name on your list." Vraxis said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Cole leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a low, almost conversational tone. "Here's the thing you never understood," he said. "Weakness isn't our curse, it's our weapon. It's what makes us dangerous, because when we're pushed, when we're desperate, we don't break." He tapped the datapad, and a hologram flared to life between them. It showed footage of Earth's cities after the Empire's first strikes, burning ruins, crying children, people digging survivors out of rubble with their bare hands. "You showed us no mercy," Cole said quietly, "and now we will show you what humanity does when it has nothing left to lose." He turned off the holo and tossed the datapad onto the table, where it slid to a stop in front of Vraxis. "You're going to tell us everything," Cole said. "Fleet movements, base locations, supply routes. You're going to help us tear your empire apart from the inside." Vraxis finally lifted his head, meeting Cole's icy gaze. "And if I refuse?" he rasped. Cole smiled. Not a kind smile, not a human smile. "If you refuse," he said, "we won't kill you." He leaned closer, his voice a low, deadly whisper. "We'll send you back, alive, broken, so your people can see what happens to those who think they can stand against Earth." For the first time since his capture, true terror stabbed through Vraxis' heart. Not for himself, for the Empire. because he knew now the humans weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for vengeance, and they were very, very good at it. Vraxis stared at the datapad like it was a bomb about to go off. His hands, shackled to the table, trembled slightly, though he willed them still. Around him, the air felt thick, charged, like the moment before a storm tears the sky open. He had been interrogated before, had even ordered the interrogations of others. But never like this. Never with so much weight pressing down. It wasn't just about extracting information. It was about crushing his will entirely, making him a symbol of total defeat. Cole remained silent, giving Vraxis the space to stew in his own fear. It was a tactic, of course. Humans were masters of pressure. They didn't scream, didn't torture, not like the Empire had done to its enemies. No, they let you destroy yourself from the inside out. Minutes dragged into hours. No food, no water, no sleep. The walls seemed to close in, and Vraxis found himself remembering things he hadn't thought of in decades. The first colony he helped burn, the shrieks of the Alari children echoing through the smoke. He had once been proud of those victories, had worn them like badges of honor. Now they clung to him like chains made of rotting flesh. Cole returned eventually, stepping through the door with a quiet, measured tread. He didn't speak right away, just set down another datapad, this one showing detailed schematics of Imperial space stations, fleet rosters, personnel files. "You see," Cole said calmly, "we already know a lot, thanks to the crews who surrendered willingly, thanks to the colonies you abandoned during your retreat. The only thing we're missing is confirmation." He slid the datapad closer with one finger, the scrape of metal on metal making Vraxis flinch. "And you, Admiral, are going to confirm it. Not for us, for history." Vraxis said nothing. He focused on breathing, trying to summon the reserves of defiance that had carried him through 1,000 battles. But they were paper-thin now, crumbling against the weight of what he had seen, what he had lost. "Your Empire abandoned you the moment we broke your fleet," Cole said, his voice almost gentle. "You know that, don't you? No reinforcements, no desperate last charge, no rescue ships slipping through the blockade. They left you to rot." Vraxis opened his mouth to argue, to deny it, but the words wouldn't come, because it was true. The Empire had left him behind without a second thought. He was nothing to them now, disposable, forgotten. "Help us," Cole said. "Tell us everything. You might just survive this." Vraxis laughed then, a dry, broken sound, bitter and small. Survival. As what? A pet? A prisoner trotted out for propaganda films? A living trophy? He had survived countless battles, entire worlds burning behind him. But this was something else. Survival here meant becoming a ghost of himself, a living reminder of the Empire's failure. Yet when he thought about the alternative, being paraded back to his homeworld, shattered and defeated for all to see, the choice became simpler. It wasn't about honor anymore. That had been stripped from him the moment Earth's fleets had torn his empire apart like paper. It was about vengeance. Not against humanity. No, they had earned their victory. It was against the Empire that had used him and discarded him. Slowly, painfully, Vraxis leaned forward. "What do you want to know?" he said, his voice hoarse but steady. Cole didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just nodded once, sharply, like a general accepting the surrender of a worthy opponent. "Everything," Cole said. And so Vraxis spoke. He spoke of hidden supply caches in dead systems. He spoke of secret bases buried under the moons of forgotten worlds. He gave them fleet schedules, troop deployments, the names of imperial governors who would fold like wet paper at the first sign of human fleets. He gave them the Empire's blood. Every word he spoke was a knife in his own soul, but he did it anyway, because vengeance burned hotter than pride. And as he talked, he could see the future unfold behind Cole's eyes, a future where Earth rose not just as a survivor, but as a new and terrible power in the galaxy. A future where the Empire would be nothing but a cautionary tale whispered in fear. Vraxis spoke until his throat was raw, until his voice was a whisper. And still, Cole listened. Still, Earth plotted its next move. Because this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. When the last detail slipped from Vraxis' lips, he slumped back in his chair, exhausted beyond anything he'd ever felt. His head throbbed, his vision blurred, but there was a strange hollow relief in the surrender. He had nothing left to give, no more lies to tell, no pride left to defend. Across the table, Admiral Cole powered off the recorder and stood silently for a moment, studying him. The coldness was still there, but there was something else now, too. A flicker of grim respect. Not forgiveness. Never forgiveness. But a quiet acknowledgement between two soldiers who knew the cost of war all too well. "You did the right thing," Cole said simply. Vraxis laughed, a dry, broken sound. "Right thing for whom?" Cole didn't answer. He didn't have to. The door hissed open, and two human guards stepped in. They unlocked Vraxis' bindings, roughly hauling him to his feet. His legs barely worked, but they dragged him along without ceremony. The walk this time was different. Not through the corridors of the prison decks. No, this time they moved deeper into the bowels of the human flagship, past hangar bays teeming with new fleets being prepared, past rows of engineers outfitting sleek, deadly ships with weapons that made Imperial tech look like relics. Earth wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were preparing to expand. And Vraxis knew, deep in his gut, that nothing in the galaxy would stop them now. Finally, they reached a small chamber sealed by heavy blast doors. Inside, a single shuttle waited, powered up and ready. Vraxis recognized the model, a basic long-range diplomatic vessel. Unarmed, lightly shielded, it wouldn't stand a chance against military craft. But it wasn't meant for battle. It was meant for humiliation. Admiral Cole stood by the ramp, arms folded behind his back. "We're sending you back to the Empire," he said. "You'll be allowed to land on your homeworld. No weapons, no defenses, just you." Vraxis stared at him, cold realization sinking in. "You want them to see what's left of me?" he rasped. Cole nodded once. "You're the first stone, the warning shot, a reminder to your people of what's coming." Vraxis closed his eyes for a long moment. There was no escape from this, no redemption. Only the slow unraveling of everything he had ever believed in. "You could just kill me," he said quietly. Cole's face hardened. That would be mercy. Without another word, the guards pushed him forward. He stumbled up the ramp into the shuttle, the doors hissing closed behind him. The ship rumbled to life, autopilot engaging as it disconnected from the docking clamps. Through the tiny viewport, Vraxis watched the human flagship drift away, its shadow swallowing stars. As the shuttle accelerated into the vast emptiness, Vraxis slumped into the pilot's chair and stared blankly ahead. His homeworld lay ahead, waiting. But he would not return as a hero. He would return as a ghost, a living corpse, and behind him, rising from the ruins of war, humanity, brutal, vengeful, unbreakable, would march across the stars. They had shown the galaxy their weakness once. Now they would show it their teeth. The journey through hyperspace was a blur of cold silence. No one spoke to him, no voices crackled through the comms. The ship was locked on autopilot, programmed with a single destination, the Imperial throne world. Vraxis sat alone in the pilot's seat, watching the shifting colors of the void slip past the viewport. Time lost all meaning. Minutes, hours, days, it didn't matter anymore. Every breath he took felt heavier, a reminder of the shame he carried like armor made of rot. When the shuttle finally dropped out of hyperspace, the sight of his homeworld hit him like a punch to the gut. There it was, the jewel of the Empire. Gleaming cities sprawled across continents, massive orbital stations hanging like silver crowns above the atmosphere, fleets of sleek Imperial warships patrolling proudly in orbit. It should have stirred pride in him. Once it would have. Now it only made the hollow inside him ache deeper. The Imperial control towers hailed the shuttle immediately, their voices sharp with suspicion. Unidentified vessel, transmit identification codes and purpose. The ship answered for him automatically, broadcasting his name, rank, and the diplomatic override codes built into the shuttle's systems. Silence followed for several seconds. Then another voice, colder and clipped, came through. Proceed to docking Platform 6. Do not deviate. Vraxis set his jaw and obeyed. Not that he had a choice. As the shuttle descended, he could already see the crowds gathering at the spaceport below. Hundreds, maybe thousands, officials, soldiers, civilians. News drones hovered above like metal vultures, capturing every moment for the Empire's propaganda networks. They didn't know yet. They didn't understand what was about to walk off that shuttle. The landing gear struck the platform with a heavy thud, the engines whining down to silence. The ramp lowered slowly, creaking against the platform's polished surface. Vraxis stood, smoothing the battered remnants of his uniform. No insignia, no weapon, only a tattered shadow of the admiral he had once been. He stepped into the light. For a heartbeat, the crowd was silent, staring in confused awe. Cameras flashed. Soldiers stood at attention, saluting sharply. And then someone gasped. Another whisper rippled through the crowd, a tide of horror. They saw the hollowness in his eyes, the way he staggered slightly as he walked. They saw the absence of an escort, the lack of any triumph, any ceremony. They saw the thin, mocking grin that curled across his lips, the broken pride he didn't even try to hide. Whispers turned to shouts. Shouts turned to screams. Where is the fleet? Where are our heroes? What happened? Questions hurled at him like stones, but Vraxis said nothing. He walked down the ramp with slow, measured steps, each one hammering another nail into the coffin of the Empire's myth of invincibility. An official rushed forward, trying to take control of the scene, trying to salvage the narrative. But it was too late. The people saw the truth written on Vraxis' body, the tremor in his hands, the exhaustion in his bones, the ruin in his eyes. The Empire wasn't safe. The Empire wasn't eternal. The Empire had fallen. It just didn't know it yet. Behind Vraxis, in the cold, endless void of space, humanity gathered its fleets, built its war machines, sharpened its knives. Earth had been attacked, Earth had bled, and now Earth would conquer. As Vraxis reached the edge of the platform, he paused, turning slightly toward the stunned crowds, the flashing cameras, the crumbling faces of once proud officials. He raised his head high, not in defiance, but in finality. They're coming, he said, his voice low but carrying like a funeral bell, and there will be no mercy. The silence that followed was heavier than any bomb. Vraxis let the words hang in the air, a prophecy written not in hope, but in blood. Then he turned and walked into the heart of the doomed empire, a broken man bearing the banner of humanity's vengeance. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, the galaxy itself would burn. The air was thick with the smell of ash and molten steel, a bitter tang that clung to the back of your throat and wouldn't let go. Somewhere in the distance, a low rumble shook the ground. Not thunder, not an earthquake, but the sound of something massive and alien tearing through what was left of Chicago. I stood there, boots sinking into the cracked pavement, staring at the horizon where the sky glowed an unnatural violet. Their ships hovered like bloated ticks, sucking the life out of everything we'd built. 5 years ago, we'd called them saviors. Now, we called them the Ziraki, and we were done begging. I remember the first time I saw one of them up close. It was back when they'd just landed, all shimmering scales and eyes like liquid fire, promising peace and technology beyond our wildest dreams. My sister, Lena, had dragged me to the town square to hear their ambassador speak. "This is it, Jace," she'd said, her voice trembling with hope. "They're going to fix everything. War, hunger, all of it." I'd wanted to believe her. Hell, I did believe her. We all did. They handed out their little miracles, cures for cancer, fusion reactors, crops that grew in deserts, and we ate it up like starving dogs. But Lena's gone now. They took her, like they took so many others, when the masks came off and the real plan showed its teeth. It started slow. Rules crept in. Curfews, quotas, resource contributions. Then the abductions began. People vanished in the night, and the Ziraki said it was for research. Research, that's what they called it when they ripped Lena from our apartment, her screams echoing down the hall as I clawed at the door they'd sealed shut. I beat my fists bloody that night, swearing I'd get her back. But by then, we were already too deep in their grip, too dependent on their tech, too scared to fight. They'd pushed us to our knees and we'd let them, until last week. That's when it snapped. A kid, couldn't have been more than 16, threw a Molotov at one of their patrol drones in New York. The footage spread like wildfire, grainy, shaky, but you could see the flames licking up that sleek alien metal, hear the crowd roar as it crashed. The Ziraki retaliated hard. They leveled half the city, turned it into a smoking crater to teach us a lesson. But instead of breaking us, it lit something feral in our bones. They'd pushed too far, and now we were pushing back. I tightened my grip on the rifle slung over my shoulder, a scavenged piece of human-made steel, not their fancy energy crap. Around me, the camp buzzed with life. Hundreds of us, maybe thousands, gathered in the ruins of an old factory just outside the city. Mechanics welded jagged armor onto beat-up trucks. Kids ran ammo crates to the snipers perched on the roof. An old woman with a scar across her face handed me a canteen, her eyes hard as flint. "Drink," she said. "You'll need it when we hit them tonight." I nodded, swallowing the warm, metallic water, feeling it settle heavy in my gut. The plan was insane. We'd gotten word from a defector, a Ziraki scientist who'd turned on his own kind, slipped us intel about a weak spot in their shield grid. One of their motherships was docked low, siphoning power from what was left of Lake Michigan. If we could overload the grid, crash the shields, we'd have a shot at the ship. Not just to hurt them, but to show them. To show every human still cowering that we weren't done yet, that we could bleed them back. I glanced at the guy next to me, a wiry ex-Marine named Torres. He was sharpening a machete, muttering under his breath about the Ziraki officer he'd gutted last month. "They think we're ants," he said, not looking up. "Let's show 'em ants can bite." I smirked, but it didn't reach my eyes. My mind was on Lena, on the last time I'd seen her, her face pale and defiant as they dragged her away. If she was still alive, she'd be on one of those ships. And if she wasn't, well, I'd make them pay for that too. Night fell fast, the violet sky deepening to black, their ships glowing like cruel stars. We moved out, a ragtag army of the broken and the pissed off, creeping through the rubble toward the lake. The air hummed with their tech, a sound that used to mean progress but now just meant death. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with something hotter, something alive. They'd taken everything, our homes, our families, our hope, but they'd forgotten one thing. Humans don't break easy, and tonight we'd remind them why. The wind off Lake Michigan carried a chill that cut through my jacket, but I barely felt it. My focus was razor sharp, locked on the mothership squatting low over the water like some monstrous insect, its tendrils of light pulsing as they drank from the lake. Up close, it was even uglier than I'd imagined, hulking, jagged, its hull a mess of sharp angles and glowing vents. The shield around it shimmered faintly, a dome of violet energy that buzzed like a swarm of bees. That was our target. That was where their arrogance lived, and we were about to shove it down their throats. Torres crouched beside me, his machete strapped to his back, a jury-rigged grenade launcher in his hands. He nodded toward the defector's coordinates, a relay station half buried in the shore's mud, its cables snaking up to the ship. "That's it," he whispered, his breath fogging in the cold. "Overload that and the whole grid fries." I didn't answer, just checked my rifle's magazine for the 10th time. The weight of it grounded me, kept my hands from shaking. Around us, the others fanned out. Shadows in the dark, armed with whatever we'd scraped together. Pipe bombs, hunting rifles, a couple of stolen Ziraki plasma cutters. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The old woman from camp, the one with the scar, took point. Her name was Marta, and she moved like she'd been born for this, silent and sure despite the limp in her left leg. She'd lost her son to the Ziraki research labs a year ago, and the hate in her eyes burned brighter than any of their tech. She signaled us forward, and we crept closer, hugging the ruins of a collapsed pier. The hum of the ship grew louder, vibrating in my chest, and I caught a glimpse of movement, Ziraki sentries patrolling the shore, their long limbs glinting under floodlights. My stomach twisted. If they spotted us before we hit the relay, we were dead. We were 50 yards out when it went wrong. One of the kids, Tommy, a scrawny 13-year-old who'd insisted on coming, tripped over a chunk of concrete. The clatter echoed like a gunshot, and a sentry's head snapped toward us, its eyes flaring red. "Down!" Marta hissed, but it was too late. A beam of light sliced through the dark, and Tommy screamed as it caught him square in the chest. He hit the ground, a smoking hole where his ribs used to be, and the night exploded into chaos. Torres fired first, the grenade launcher coughing out a homemade explosive that arced toward the sentry. It detonated mid-air, showering the thing with shrapnel, and it staggered, shrieking, a sound like metal tearing. I bolted up, rifle barking as I sprayed rounds at the second sentry rushing us. Bullets pinged off its scales, but one caught it in the neck, and black ichor sprayed. It dropped, thrashing, and for a second I thought we might pull this off. Then the ship reacted. A klaxon blared, deafening, and the shield pulsed brighter, throwing off waves of heat. Drones poured from the mothership's underside, sleek, buzzing things with glowing stingers, and the air filled with the whine of their weapons. Marta yelled something I couldn't hear over the noise, and we scattered, diving for cover as beams carved craters into the shore. I slid behind a rusted shipping container, heart slamming against my ribs, and peeked out. The relay was still there, 30 yards away, unguarded in the chaos. We could still do this. "Jace, move!" Torres shouted, lobbing another grenade at the drones. It burst in a fireball, taking 2 of them down, and I ran, legs pumping, lungs burning. The ground shook as the ship fired something bigger, a cannon blast that turned a chunk of the pier into ash. I didn't look back. Couldn't. All I saw was the relay, its control panel flickering in the dark. I slid to my knees beside it, ripping off the cover, and stared at the mess of alien wiring inside. The defector had said red to blue, overload the core. My hands shook as I yanked the red cable free, sparks biting my fingers, and jammed it into the blue slot. Nothing happened. For a heartbeat, I thought we'd failed. Thought Tommy had died for nothing, that Lena was lost forever. Then the relay whined, a high-pitched scream that made my teeth ache, and the shield flickered. Just once, but it was enough. A cheer went up from the others, ragged and wild, and I grinned despite the blood and smoke. The drones faltered, some crashing into the lake, and the sentries froze, confused. We'd cracked their armor, but the ship wasn't done. A shadow loomed as it shifted, rising higher, and a new sound cut through the night, a deep, guttural roar from inside its belly. Something was coming, something big. I gripped my rifle tighter, the grin fading. We'd stung them, sure. Now they were pissed, and whatever they threw at us next, I knew it'd test every ounce of fight we had left. The roar from the mothership grew louder, a bone-rattling growl that made the water in the lake ripple like it was scared too. I stayed crouched by the relay, my hands still tingling from the sparks, watching the shield flicker again. Once, twice, before it stabilized. We'd heard it, but not enough. Not yet. The air thickened with a new kind of heat, something oppressive and alive, and then I saw it. A hatch sliding open on the ship's underside, spilling out a flood of green light. Whatever was coming, it wasn't drones or sentries. It was worse. "Fall back!" Marta yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. She was dragging a wounded guy, some mechanic whose leg was a mess of blood and bone, toward the pier's ruins. Torres fired off another grenade, the blast lighting up the night, but it barely dented the ship. The drones were regrouping, their stingers glowing hotter, and the sentries were back on their feet, closing in. We were pinned, and that hatch was still vomiting light like a wound that wouldn't close. I didn't move. Couldn't. My eyes were locked on the ship, on the shape emerging from that glow. It was massive, twice the size of their sentries. Maybe more. A hulking thing of scales and claws and teeth that gleamed like wet obsidian. Its legs hit the shore with a thud that cracked the earth, and its head swiveled, 4 eyes burning red as they swept over us. A Zeraki war beast. I'd heard rumors, whispers from survivors who'd seen them unleashed on other cities, but seeing it now, up close, turned my guts to ice. This wasn't just a weapon. This was their answer, their way of saying we'd crossed a line they'd never let us uncross. "Jace, get out of there," Torres shouted, but his voice was distant, drowned by the pounding in my ears. The beast took a step, then another, its claws gouging the ground, and I saw something else, figures moving behind it. Zeraki soldiers, armored and armed, fanning out like they were hurting us. They weren't panicking anymore, they were hunting. I scrambled back, rifle up, and fired a burst at the beast. The bullet sparked off its hide, useless as pebbles, and it roared again, a sound that hit me like a punch. I ran then, ducking low as a drone's beam scorched the air where I'd been. The relay was still humming, still alive, and that gave me something to cling to. We'd weakened them. We could still do this. I slid into cover beside Marta, her face smeared with dirt and blood, her eyes blazing. "What the hell is that thing?" I gasped, reloading with fumbling hands. "Doesn't matter," she snapped. "We kill it or we die." She shoved a plasma cutter into my grip, one of the stolen ones, its charge low but still glowing. "Aim for the joints. It's all we've got." I nodded, swallowing the fear, and peeked out. The beast was closer now, tearing through a truck we'd rigged with explosives. The blast rocked it back, but it didn't fall, just shook its head and kept coming, angrier than before. Torres appeared beside us, his launcher empty, machete in hand. "Shield's still up, but it's weak," he said, panting. "We hit that relay again, we might drop it for good." He jerked his chin toward the beast. "Gotta get past that bastard first." I didn't argue. The relay was our shot, Our only shot. And if that meant facing down a nightmare, so be it. For Lena, for Tommy, for every one of us they'd crushed. We moved fast, splitting up to confuse it. Marta went left, hobbling but fierce, firing her pistol to draw its attention. Torres took the right, slashing at a sentry that got too close, black blood slicking his blade. I went straight, plasma cutter humming, aiming for the relay. The beast saw me. Those red eyes locked on and charged, faster than something that big should have been. I dove, hitting the mud as its claws raked the air above me, and rolled, coming up with the cutter aimed at its knee. I squeezed the trigger. The beam hit true, a white-hot line that seared through scales and sinew. The beast shrieked, stumbling, and I didn't wait. Sprinted for the relay, my boots slipping in the muck. Behind me, it thrashed, lashing out with a tail I hadn't even seen, and I heard Marta cry out. I didn't look back, couldn't. The relay was there, 10 yards, 5, and I slammed into it, ripping wires free, shoving them anywhere they'd spark. The hum spiked, the shield flickered hard, and then, darkness. The violet dome collapsed, exposing the ship's belly, and a ragged cheer rose from the shadows. But the beast wasn't done. I turned just as it lunged, its jaws wide, and I braced for the end. Then Torres was there, screaming, driving his machete into its eye. It reared back, flailing, and I saw Marta limping toward us, blood streaming down her face. We'd dropped the shield. We'd won this round. But the ship was awake now, and the real fight was just beginning. The mothership loomed above us, naked without its shield, its hull a jagged silhouette against the black sky. The air tasted of ozone and blood, and the ground trembled as the war beast thrashed, Torres still clinging to its head, his machete buried deep in its eye. It roared, a wet, guttural sound, and flung him off like he was nothing. He hit the mud hard, rolling to a stop near Marta, who was barely on her feet, one arm hanging useless, her face a mask of pain and fury. I ran to them, the plasma cutter still hot in my hands, its charge flickering out. We'd torn the shield down, but we were running on fumes, and the Ziraki knew it. "Torres!" I yelled, dropping beside him. He groaned, spitting blood, but waved me off, dragging himself up. "I'm fine, Jace. Focus on the ship." His voice was ragged, but his eyes were sharp, locked on the beast as it staggered, half-blind and pissed. Marta grabbed my arm, her grip iron despite the blood soaking her sleeve. "They're coming," she rasped, nodding towards the mothership. She was right. More hatches were opening, spilling out soldiers and drones, their lights cutting through the dark like knives. We'd kicked the hive, and now it was swarming. I glanced at the relay, its guts sparking and smoking. It was dead. Our one trick played out. The ship was vulnerable, but we were exposed too. A handful of broken humans against an army that didn't know mercy. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something heavier. Regret, maybe, or the weight of every promise I'd made to Lena. I'd told her I'd keep her safe. I'd told her we'd win this. Now here I was, knee-deep in mud and death, and she was still up there, somewhere in that metal hell, if she was even alive. "We hit the ship," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "We take it down, or we take it with us." Torres barked a laugh, short and bitter. "You're insane, kid. I like it." Marta just nodded, her jaw tight, and handed me her pistol. "5 rounds left," she said like it was a gift. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going, enough to make them bleed. The beast lunged again, slower now, its wounded leg dragging, and we scattered. I fired the pistol, aiming for its remaining eyes, and one shot hit, popping like a blister. It screeched, thrashing blind, and Torres took the chance, slashing its flank with his machete. Marta hobbled toward a fallen drone, wrenching its stinger free, a makeshift spear, glowing faintly. We weren't soldiers, not really, but we fought like we'd been born for this. Like every cut and bruise they'd given us had forged something unbreakable. Above us the ship shifted, its engines roaring to life, a deep thrum that shook the shore. It was lifting off, trying to escape now that its shield was gone. Panic flared in my gut, not because it was leaving, but because it might take Lena with it. "No, you don't," I muttered, and broke into a sprint, dodging a drone's beam that scorched the ground behind me. There was a ramp still down, a loading bay where soldiers were pouring out, and I aimed for it, legs burning, breath tearing at my lungs. I didn't know what I'd do if I got there, just that I had to. Torres caught up, swearing under his breath, and Marta wasn't far behind, her limp worse but her eyes wild. "You're gonna get us killed," he shouted, but he didn't stop, matching my pace as we closed in. The ramp was 20 yards away, then 10, and the soldiers saw us, plasma rifles snapping up, firing wild. I ducked, felt heat graze my shoulder, and kept going. 5 yards. 2. I leapt, hitting the ramp hard, rolling to my feet inside the ship's belly. It was chaos. Crates toppling, soldiers shouting in their guttural tongue, the air thick with the stink of fuel and metal. Torres landed beside me, machete ready, and Marta stumbled in, stinger raised like a warrior queen. We were inside now, 3 humans against a fortress, and the ramp started to close behind us. No way out. The beast's roars faded outside, replaced by the hum of the ship's core, a heartbeat of power somewhere deep within. I gripped the pistol, my last 4 rounds, and met Torres's grin with one of my own. "They're gonna regret letting us in," he said, and I believed him. We weren't just ants anymore. We were the fire in their walls, and we'd burn this thing down from the inside, or die trying. The inside of the mothership was a labyrinth of cold metal and pulsing lights, a hive of sharp edges and alien noise that pressed against my skull. I moved fast, pistol in one hand, the other brushing the walls to keep my balance as the floor tilted. The ship was climbing, engines howling. Torres was ahead, machete dripping black from a soldier he'd gutted, its body slumped in a corner. Marta trailed, her stinger sparking, her breath ragged but her eyes fierce. We were invaders now, fleas on a beast too big to notice, but we'd make it feel us. A squad of Ziraki rounded the corridor, rifles glowing, and I fired, 3 shots, 2 hits, their scales cracking as they fell. The last lunged, claws slashing, and Torres met it, his blade sinking into its throat. "Keep moving!" he barked, shaking blood off his arm. We had no plan, just a direction. Deeper, toward the core's hum, where the ship lived, where Lena might be. The air grew hotter, thicker, the walls vibrating as we pushed through a bulkhead into a cavernous chamber. Towers of machinery loomed, cables snaking like veins, and there it was, the core, a glowing orb of violet energy suspended in a web of conduits. Ziraki techs scurried around it, oblivious until Marta hurled her stinger. It hit, sparking wild, and they scattered, shrieking. Alarms blared, red lights flashing, and I felt the ship shudder. Our chaos was working. "Jace, there!" Torres pointed to a platform above, where a figure stood, taller, armored, its eyes locked on us. An officer. It raised a weapon, and a beam seared past my head, melting steel. I dove, firing my last round, missed, and the officer leapt down, landing with a thud that shook the floor. Torres charged, machete swinging, but it caught his arm, twisting hard. He yelled, blade clattering, and I tackled it, slamming us both into a conduit. Sparks flew, burning my skin, but I held on, clawing at its face. Marta limped in, grabbing Torres's machete, and drove it into the officer's back. It screeched, thrashing, and I shoved it off, panting. The core pulsed faster, unstable, and I saw our chance. "The conduits," I said, voice hoarse. "Break 'em." We attacked, me with the plasma cutter's dying glow, Torres with a scavenged rifle butt, Marta with raw fury. Metal tore, energy arced, and the core whined, a scream that shook the ship. Then I heard it. A voice, faint, human. "Jace?" My heart stopped. Lena, somewhere beyond the core, alive. I turned, ready to run, when the floor buckled, and the ship lurched, falling. We'd done it too well. The core was dying, and so were we, unless we found her fast. The ship was screaming now, a dying giant thrashing in the sky. The core's violet glow flickered wildly, spitting arcs of energy that scorched the walls and floor, and the whole chamber tilted hard, throwing me against a conduit. My shoulder burned where it hit, but I barely felt it. Lena's voice echoed in my head, faint but real, pulling me like a lifeline. She was here, somewhere, and I wasn't leaving without her. The floor buckled again, metal groaning as the ship lost altitude, and I knew we were running out of time. "Jace, we gotta move," Torres yelled, hauling himself up, his arm bent wrong from the officer's grip. Blood streaked his face, but he was still swinging, smashing the rifle butt into another conduit. Sparks rained down, and the core's whine pitched higher, a sound that clawed at my ears. Marta was on her knees, panting, the machete buried in the officer's corpse beside her. She looked half dead, her scar stark against pale skin, but she nodded at me, fierce as ever. "Go find her," she rasped. "We'll finish this." I didn't argue. I bolted past the core, dodging a tech that lunged at me. Its claws grazed my jacket, but I kept running, deeper into the ship. The corridors twisted, narrower here, lined with pods glowing faintly green. My stomach churned as I passed them. Humans floated inside, tubes snaking into their arms, their faces slack. Experiments. Rage boiled up, hot and sharp, but I forced it down. Lena. I had to find Lena. "Lena!" I shouted, my voice cracking over the alarms. The ship lurched again, a violent drop that slammed me into a wall, and I heard it. Her voice, closer now. "Jace, here!" I spun, zeroing in on a pod tucked behind a bulkhead, its glass fogged but her shape unmistakable. She was pounding on it, her dark hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with fear and fight. Alive. She was alive. I ripped at the pod's controls, my hands shaking, tearing wires when the panel wouldn't give. The glass hissed open, and she spilled out, coughing, grabbing my arms like I might vanish. "You're here!" she gasped, voice raw. "You're really here!" I pulled her close, her warmth cutting through the cold dread I'd carried too long. But there was no time to feel it. The floor tilted sharper, and a blast of heat roared from the core chamber. Marta and Torres were still at it, breaking everything they could. "We're getting out," I said, dragging her up. She nodded, unsteady but stubborn, the Lena I remembered. We stumbled back toward the chamber, the ship shaking like it was tearing itself apart. The core was a mess of light and smoke now, conduits dangling, and Torres was there, wrestling a soldier off Marta. She was bleeding bad, a gash across her chest, but she swung the machete one last time, splitting a cable that erupted in a fireball. "Ramps that way!" Torres shouted, pointing past the chaos. The ship was low now. I could feel it, the pull of gravity winning, and we ran, Lena's hand in mine, Torres half carrying Marta. Soldiers fired, beams slicing the air, but the ship's death throes were on our side, walls collapsing to block their shots. We hit the loading bay, the ramp still cracked open, and outside, the lake rushed up fast, dark and unforgiving. "Jump!" I yelled, and we did. Lena first, then me, Torres shoving Marta out before leaping himself. The cold hit like a fist, water swallowing us as the ship crashed, a deafening roar of metal and fire. I kicked up, breaking the surface, gasping, and saw Lena beside me, alive, real, The mothership sank, its glow fading, and somewhere in the dark I heard Torres laugh, wild and triumphant. We'd done it. We'd struck back. But as I pulled Lena to shore, I knew they'd come for us again, and we'd be ready. The shore was a graveyard of wreckage and mud, the lake lapping at twisted chunks of the mothership that hadn't sunk. Smoke hung thick, stinging my eyes as I dragged Lena onto solid ground, her fingers digging into my arm like she still wasn't sure this was real. She coughed, water dripping from her hair, and I dropped beside her, chest heaving, every muscle screaming. The cold bit deep, but I didn't care. She was here, breathing, her eyes meeting mine with that same fire I'd thought they'd snuffed out. "You're an idiot," she muttered, voice shaky but sharp. "Coming after me like that." "Had to," I said, managing a grin despite the ache in my bones. "You'd do the same." She didn't argue, just squeezed my hand tighter, and for a moment the world shrank to just us. Two kids from a broken city who'd clawed their way back to each other. But the moment didn't last. A groan pulled my head up. Torres, hauling Marta out of the water, her face pale, blood mixing with the mud under her. "She's bad," he said, voice tight. I scrambled over, Lena behind me, and saw the gash across Marta's chest, deep and ugly, her breathing shallow. She'd taken the hit back in the core chamber, kept fighting anyway, and now it was catching up. I pressed my hands to the wound, uselessly trying to stop the bleeding, but she swatted me off, weak but fierce. "Don't!" she rasped. "Did what we came for, that's enough!" "No, it's not," I snapped, anger flaring, at her, at the Ziraki, at everything. "You don't get to quit now." She smirked, a ghost of a laugh rattling out, but her eyes were fading, and I felt it, that helpless twist in my gut. Torres knelt beside her, his busted arm trembling as he gripped her hand. "You're a hell of a fighter, old lady," he said, voice thick. She nodded just once, and then she was gone, her scarred face still defiant even in death. Silence fell, heavy and wrong, broken only by the distant crackle of the sinking ship. Lena's hand found my shoulder, steadying me, and I forced myself up, swallowing the grief. We'd lost too much already. Marta, Tommy, countless others. But we'd hit them hard. The mothership was down, a smoking ruin in the lake, and that meant something. It had to. Torres stood too, wiping blood from his face, his jaw set. "They'll come back," he said, staring at the horizon where the violet sky still glowed, fainter now but not gone. "More ships, more of those bastards." He was right. We'd won a battle, not the war, and the Ziraki didn't forgive. Lena shivered beside me, her clothes soaked, but her voice was steady. "Then we hit them again, harder." I looked at her, saw the steel in her eyes, and nodded. She'd been inside their labs, seen what they did. She knew the cost better than any of us. "What did they do to you up there?" I asked, quiet, dreading the answer. Her face darkened, lips tightening. "Tests. Pain. They wanted to break us, figure out why we fight." She paused, then met my gaze. "They didn't get it. We don't break. We bend till we snap back." Her words lit something in me, a fire that had been smoldering since they took her. Torres grunted, a grim smile tugging at his mouth. "Damn right. Let's give 'em more to chew on." We turned from the lake, trudging back toward the camp, the ruins of Chicago looming ahead. The factory buzzed with life as we got close, shouts, cheers, people running out to meet us. They'd seen the ship fall, felt the ground shake, and now they crowded around, dirty faces lit with hope and hunger for more. A mechanic clapped my back, a kid handed Lena a blanket, and someone pressed a canteen into Torres's hand. They asked questions. How'd we do it? What's next? And I saw it in their eyes. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were a spark, and it was spreading. The Ziraki had pushed us too far, and now humanity was striking back, one bloody, defiant step at a time. The camp was a furnace of noise and motion by the time we stumbled in, the factory's rusted walls echoing with voices, some cheering, some shouting orders, all alive with a fire we'd lit. The mothership's fall had ripped through the air like a thunderclap, and now every pair of eyes turned to us, glinting with something I hadn't seen in years. Belief. Not just hope, but the raw, jagged kind that comes when you've got nothing left to lose and everything to take back. Lena clung to the blanket around her shoulders, her face pale but set, while Torres limped beside me, his busted arm tucked close. We were battered, soaked, one less with Marta gone, but we'd done the impossible, and it wasn't over. A crowd parted as we pushed through, and a figure stepped forward. Reyes, a grizzled ex-cop who'd been holding this place together since the Ziraki turned Chicago to ash. His left eye was a milky scar, but the right one burned as he looked us over. "You crazy sons of bitches actually did it," he said, voice rough as gravel. He glanced past us, towards the lake where smoke still curled into the sky. "Ship's down. What's the cost?" "Too much," I said, the weight of Marta's death sinking deeper. But they paid more. Reyes nodded, slow, like he understood the math of blood and loss better than most. He jerked his head toward the factory's heart, where mechanics were already tearing into scavenged Ziraki tech, sparks flying. "Good, 'cause we're not done. Word's spreading. Other cells saw it, out in Detroit, Milwaukee. They're asking what's next." Next. The word hit me like a punch, and I felt Lena tense beside me. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Next, we don't wait for them to hit us. We take the fight to them, every ship, every base. They think we're weak. We prove we're not." Her words were steady, forged in whatever hell she'd endured up there, and the crowd leaned in, hanging on them. Reyes raised an eyebrow, but a grin tugged at his mouth. "Girl's got teeth. I like it." Torres laughed, a short, sharp sound. "She's right. They'll come hard now. More ships, more of those damn beasts. We hit 'em before they regroup." He flexed his good hand, itching for his machete, and I saw the same hunger in the faces around us. Kids with stolen rifles, old men with pipe bombs, women sharpening scavenged blades. We weren't an army, not by their standards, but we were something meaner, a pack of wolves with nothing left to fear. Reyes clapped a hand on my shoulder, hard enough to jolt me. "You started this, Jace. What's your call?" I looked at Lena, at Torres, at the sea of battered, defiant humans waiting for a spark to ignite them. My throat tightened, thinking of Marta's last smirk, Tommy's scream, all the graves we dug under their violet sky. "We find their nests," I said, voice low but growing. "Every ship they've got grounded, every lab they've built, we burn 'em down. They took our world. We take it back, piece by bloody piece." A roar went up, ragged and wild, fists punching the air. Reyes grinned full now, barking orders, scouts to map Ziraki sites, techs to rig weapons, runners to link with other cells. Lena grabbed my arm, pulling me aside as the chaos swirled. "You sure about this?" she asked, quiet, her eyes searching mine. "It's not just about me anymore." "It never was," I said, meeting her gaze. "It's about all of us. They pushed too far, Lena. Now they get humanity unleashed." She nodded, a flicker of pride cutting through the exhaustion, and squeezed my hand one last time before turning to join the fight brewing around us. Days later we moved out, hundreds strong, a tide of steel and fury rolling toward the next Ziraki outpost, their violet lights dotting the horizon. The sky rumbled, their ships stirring, but we didn't flinch. We'd lost everything, homes, families, peace, and found something sharper in the wreckage, a will to strike back, to bend and snap and tear until they regretted ever landing here. They'd called us ants, weak, insignificant. Now they'd learn. Humanity wasn't done. We were just getting started.